I am so excited right now. You guys
Me
have
too.
no idea what you're in for the next hour with my sweet friend, Katie Moon. I was so excited that she was my guest on the podcast today because I often, season anyway, I've been interviewing a lot of strangers. And so it feels really relieving to know that my community is in really safe keepings with you and your spirit and our sisterhood, and to just catch up. I'm so excited about this time to be able to just shed light, no pun intended, we'll get into that in a minute, on all of the things that are Katie Moon. You guys, I can jump into so many things, but we're going to definitely have to talk about the first time we met and what has flourished in our relationship since then. Thank you for being here.
Yes, it is an honor to be here. I'm so excited to be here. I've just been excited the last 2 days as it's been getting closer, and just thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I feel like since the first time we met, you guys, we went to the She Speaks conference. Gosh, was it 4 years ago now? 3 years ago?
I think we technically met at Christine Caine.
Oh, that's right. Even better. Oh,
Yes.
I'm so glad you reminded me of that. Oh
Yes.
my gosh. Okay. So you guys, that was a crazy story just to get there, but I knew absolutely no one. Flew across country to Costa Mesa, California, to a Christine Caine conference about preaching and teaching. And I had no business going. I had no idea why I was there, what I was preaching or teaching about. I just came to know the Lord a few years prior to that and was still in like my becoming, I always say becoming, but my becoming phase of my faith. And I run into you in the outside foyer and we kind of just like buddied up the rest of the conference. But I remember being completely like enthralled by the language that you used and your sense of confidence and your connectivity to the Holy Spirit.
I remember my first impression of you. It was like, it sounds silly to say, but I remember just feeling like this zap. Like I'm supposed to meet this person. Like it just hit me. Like there was this knowing, and I was immediately intrigued by you. And I could tell that we kind of ran at the same pace and on the same level. And I was from the beginning excited to meet you.
That's so awesome.
Yes.
And I love that. Pace has been a huge word in my life in the last couple of months. So it's funny that you say that.
Yes.
I'll be curious because yes, we definitely are both supersonic. We both have a lot of energy and a lot to give based on what we've been given from God and from our marriages and just from life in general, I think. But I think my pace in learning how to be more like Mary while also maintaining my Martha innate spirit has been something I've been leaning into a lot. So I'll be curious as we're talking today and catching up if you can sense that at all.
I love it.
So you guys, Katie she's filled with so much insight, so much wisdom that the next time we got together, which was at the She Speaks conference, we shared a space. We actually shared a tree house, which is even cooler.
It was awesome.
We didn't stay in the cookie cutter hotel. We had a tree house. And we were talking about the books that we were both presenting at the She Speaks conference. And so I want you to be able to kind of share some wisdom on what that book was, and maybe even share if something has become since then. I'm super curious.
Wow. Okay. So at the time I was coming to present a book that I was titling When God Created Light. I believed that what it was going to be was either not a novel in the fiction sense, but a nonfiction, like big kind of theological book. I was also open very much to the idea of, rather than like this chapter book, it was going to be curriculum, like Bible study curriculum that would potentially have corresponding videos to it. So presently it is not a book. It is a video formatted class. It's an 8-week in-depth Bible course, I call it, because it's beyond a traditional Bible study. And you do print your own pages and kind of make it into a book, but in the present moment, it is in video format. However, print format, I believe, is on the horizon soon of this
Yay.
content. So
I love that. I love that so much. And I
Yeah.
know that I think I have access to that. I need to circle back because
Sure.
I'll tell you honestly, when I think about Katie and I think about her theological background and the language that she first came to me with when she was explaining her book, I felt like I was a minion in a professor's mind and like just circling in like Thomas Edison's brain, talking about light, no parallel to the fact that he created essentially the light bulb. But you just had a depth, like I said, that I wanted to tap into, and I'm super still enthralled by the way that you teach and the way that you get super granular is now how I want and need to understand the Bible, versus at the time I was like a waddler and a toddler in my faith. And so now I feel like God has just really positioned me to a place of desiring that educational sense in learning about the word and learning about that God, while fundamentally simple, and we think about light as like has a simple element to it. It's either light or it's dark, right? But you have taken just such context in the start of light, even from creation all the way to where it is today. So I'm definitely have to get access to that course. What's the name of it? Is it the same as the title of the book?
It is. It's called When God Created Light, and the subtitle is Reconsidering the Beginning, What Really Happened and How This Changes Everything.
So good. And I always think of light when I was being, I guess, mentored, I should say, because I wasn't coached by who I always call my fairy godmother. She always talks about how light was actually created at inception of birth. And in utero, when the egg and the sperm come together, there is a chemical reaction of light. And so I think that there's such parallel to like light in the start of creation and also simultaneously in the start of creation. Like only God, like, right? Only God.
Wow. That's amazing. First of all, backtracking a little bit to what you said about how you're hungry for depth now, I just wanted to comment that I feel like that is happening in the church at large right now. Like, I feel like this is such a time for this course. People are hungry for deeper, for more. And so I feel like you're not alone there. Like, this is a thing that's happening in our country and probably globally as well. But as far as light and in the beginning, that's really where my research journey on light began. And, that's, so I decided I was going to start researching light for a number of reasons, which we can get into if you want. But when you're a researcher, and particularly of the scriptures, where you start, especially when it's a theme or a word study, is you go back to the first mention of the word in the scriptures. And so I remember I had actually started this late at night. One night I was in bed and I was thinking, where is the first mention of light? And it was before I even did like a software search or anything. It was just off the top of my head. And immediately, in the beginning, God created light popped into my mind. And I was just like, whoa, is that like, because I was curious very much about the concept of walking in the light at the time. And that's really where I was getting to. And so when I was like, okay, the first mention of light in scriptures is Genesis 1, it was very interesting. It's like, all the way back there, is that the beginning of this journey of what it means to walk in the light? And lo and behold, that's what I definitely discovered it to be. And it's at the inception of the scriptures, right? And has very much to do with what we are as humans.
That is so beautiful. And as you're saying it, I'm like putting ourselves back in the log cabin and the tree house and experiencing, even just like that wine night with my husband who came and visited us for one night and stayed with her, totally random. But it's this knowing that there is always a beginning. And then there is the evolution of all of the grandiose, but the difference in evolution and how some people might look at it from a scientific perspective rather than a faith perspective is that God had a plan. And that is like so reassuring to me and allows me so much trust into like stepping into tomorrow, is that it's already been planned. And so as you talk about walking in the light, I want you to like take us back to like pre-Katie research phase, talk us through kind of a bit of your testimony. Where were you? How have you been like kind of grown in your faith? because I think being a research theologian, research storyteller, if you will, who you are, and a teacher by nature, there's got to be a root element to that. So I'm so curious how that was evolved.
Absolutely. So I thought I was going to grow up and be an artist, and I very much did.
You still are. I will get into that. So true.
Yes, we can talk about that more. But I got my bachelor's degree in graphic design, went on very quickly to become a commercial illustrator, and that whole thing. But what happened, I'm trying to be succinct here, which I'm not always, that's not my strength always. I'm a detail girl. So, okay.
I'll circle you in.
Oh, there's so much we could talk about.
Yes. I know.
Okay. So started out as an illustrator, did that for, I think, about 8 years, but 2 years before I kind of stopped that portion of my work, or pushed pause on it, I should say. I happened into a seminary classroom. I was so busy at the time. I had really little kids. I was working almost full time as an illustrator. I was doing all kinds of volunteer work. And so I saw this Bible class and I thought, well, that sounds interesting. It was through the church, and I didn't look into it beyond that. And I had to pay for the course. So that should have been clue number one. And it was located at the new local seminary. That should have been clue number two. But all I knew was I was going to some Bible study. That's it. So I go to my first class. This is about 10 years ago now. And I walk out of that first class literally hyperventilating, like, I can't breathe. I'm panicking because I'm going, I can't do this class, because what happened in that class is they handed out a syllabus. When they handed out the syllabus, I'm going, why does this class have a syllabus?
What is not a Bible study?
This is not a Bible study. What? So I find out I'm going to be writing papers every week and a 20-page paper at the end of the semester. I'm going to be taking quizzes every week. I'm going to be having a final exam. I'm going to be reading hundreds of pages a week, and not just light reading. This is intense, heavy reading. And I'm going, and I'm supposed to continue working and being a mom and all the other things, right? So, but because I had already paid money for this class, and it was a startup seminary, I did not feel like I could take my money back and not do it. So I stayed. So all of these things had to align for me to enter seminary. Like, I would never have thought I had the capacity for that had I just gone searching for it.
And that's the cool thing, that like God knew that about you too.
Yes.
And it was presented the way that it was, in the state of mind that you were in, kind of like discombobulated, to be like, now is the time. Because if you would put all of the stuff down on a piece of paper, it doesn't make sense that you would also be able to stretch your capacity to do something else. And I think that that's a message in and of itself for so many people who come around and are like, you're so busy. And I'm like, I'm so intentional with my time and with what I do when I do it. And if something comes into play, I say no, if it's not in alignment with what God has me to do. But I will tell you, new door opportunities are opened all the time. And for some reason, somehow, like, we're looking at even starting back our home church. I'm like, when? How's it going to happen? But my heart is telling me it's the right thing to do, and I'm yearning for it. And so there's just, you say yes to things, and God creates the capacity, not us.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I don't even know how long it was, but very quickly I went from hyperventilating and I cannot do this to being madly in love with the coursework, with that intense level and that depth of work right in the middle of my mess. And it was just like, it hit something deep in me, like you were saying, like, in your heart, that was fulfilling in a different way than my artwork was at that time. And it was like a part of me was being completed, so to speak. Like, I believe we're complete, but it was just like, there's something about me and the way I'm created that has to do this. And so within a couple of years, I actually ended up pushing pause on my art because I had another baby. And I've kind of found that I can balance about 3 big things at a time, me personally. So I had my kids, I had my art career, I was running my own business, I had an agent, and I had seminary, which for those of you who don't know, before I went to seminary, I thought seminary meant school to become a pastor or priest. Seminary simply can mean, or it not that it can mean, seminary simply means graduate school for theology, something related to the study of God. So it's graduate school. I was getting a master's degree. Okay, so I had
by accident, by the way.
by accident. So I had art, I had my kids, I had seminary, and now all of a sudden I had a newborn baby.
And your marriage, right?
And I'm married, yeah.
She's
right.
not just popping out babies. Right. She's not just popping out babies. There's a man, an Adam and an Eve.
Speaking of which, that man was like, Katie, I think Benton, our youngest, is his own category right now. Like, it's a newborn baby. And so something has to give. Like everything was just, nothing was going well at the moment. So at that time, I knew it had to be my art, that it needed to remain seminary. And so here I am 10 years later, never having stopped that intense research journey. I stopped seminary, but I'm still going with that and actually looking at now bringing art back in. So,
I love it. Well, you've been doing art too. And so like with the graphic design piece,
true.
I mean, one of the things I met you, I had this like one idea, right? Because even if you spend the amount of time that we did together over the 3-day weekend, I got to know you really well. And then fast forward via Instagram, it was a few months later, she starts throwing out this like graphics. And I'm like, where did this come from? She's like, oh, I used to do this thing. I'm like, this is amazing. What do you mean? And of course, my entrepreneurial brain is like, you could create a business. You could do this thing. And you're like, I already did that. Yes. That's not the intent. I'm just sharing. But you've allowed it to like evolve into this new thing. And the thing that I've just been enamored with specifically as a mom and a mom of faith and raising children in a Christian home is the Advent calendar storyline, all that you did as well, which I think is just so beautiful. Tell them about that.
Yeah. So I love Christmas. That's really kind of where its roots are. I've been obsessed with Christmas forever. And I would say 8-9 years ago, I found an Advent series online. It was called Truth in the Tinsel. I think you can still get it. And it was very appropriate for the first years of when my kids were younger. And what it was every day there was a little Bible reading. And then there was either a craft or a coloring activity. I was way too busy to do a craft every day with my kids. They could color in a little Christmas ornament. It was just a paper ornament. So I'm like, okay, I can handle this. So it would be we'd read a little Bible verse. There'd be maybe 3 sentences of a little devotional. Again, very elementary. And then this coloring, this ornament they colored. And then as Christmas drew near, this tree, and I would make it out of wrapping paper and just hang it on my wall. It would fill up, until we got to Christmas, and then it was all full of these ornaments my kids had colored. So I had done that for years. And about 2 years ago now, it was just feeling too elementary, and we'd been doing it long enough that I have now quite far in my research journey too, right? And so my understandings have deepened and evolved and all of that. And so I just thought I want to do something different. And at first it was really about my own kids, but I decided to allow it to be for everybody. And it's now reproducible, and you can buy it on my website and I think on Etsy too. So it's kind of the same theme, but it's with now, and it actually very much mirrors the same timeline of that one did on the daily, but it's now with my own little devotional written in.
It's really incredible. Yeah. And you also had the other devotion. That was one of the things when I first met you, you had already like self-published. And I think I have like the copy that's a copy, like it literally says coffee across it. And I like hold it so treasured because I'm like, this is really amazing that I have this version, because I know it's been reiterated. I know that there's been more that's evolved since then. Yeah. But it's a quick read in the sense that it's a small book.
Yes.
But like she said, with the understanding of seminary and the depth that she had access to, she writes from the same depth. And so I want people to start like having a bit of the revelation that you shared with me on that long weekend, and that I just always come back to you for. I can trust that if I had a question biblically, if I needed support or prayer in a depth that it's outside of the traditional, honestly, I'm going to say church, because there's no sugarcoating when you come to Katie. Like Katie's like, this is the raw, this is the real. Let's find out the root and the depth. And I value you so much for that. So I want others to have similar revelation. So share kind of what that has become for you. And I'm sure it's new things since we spoke last, but I'd love for you to just get into the depths of that.
So I think I'll start a little bit with my why I came into becoming a biblical researcher, other than happening into seminary. Like I could have gone from the end of that schooling into a different direction altogether, but why it was about biblical research. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the theory that I've developed as far as hermeneutics, biblical interpretation, and how to do that. I'm very passionate about biblical literacy and understanding how to interpret the scriptures, because there's very much a science to it and also an art, and it's very crucially important, I think. But first, my why, if that's okay. Is that okay?
Please, that's perfect. That's perfect.
Because I think I think it'll help make sense of some of my journey. So about 10, 11 years ago, I kind of woke up in my own self to a sin issue. Now, at this time, no, it was after I started seminary. So it was about 10 years ago, shortly after I started seminary. So I'm getting very, very serious about my relationship with God at this time. I'm spending lots and lots of hours in the scriptures and learning about faith, learning about God, and living the life that the Bible talks about was becoming very important to me. Not just living it on the surface and performing all the right things, but like having like the fruit of the Spirit, having the perfect peace the Bible says is possible, living in the freedom that the scriptures say is possible to live in, and so much of the internal stuff, right? So I'm becoming very serious about this. And at that time, I woke up to what I called at that time a sin issue, an area in my thinking that was inconsistent and what I believed was wrong, I guess, and didn't align with the life of peace, perfect joy, perfect love, right? And I don't ever get into specifics about it because I feel like it's just distracting and it doesn't matter. It could be literally any sin issue under the sun, and this still applies. So at the time, I remember kind of catching myself with a certain thought pattern and going, oh, I can't believe I just thought that. Oh, gross. Like, I'm not going to think like that anymore. I'm not going to have that thought anymore. And it was about 2 weeks later, I caught myself doing it again. And I remember again going, oh, no, I wasn't going to think like that. I need to stop this. And long story short, after about 2 years, it became a 2-year journey of fighting this exact thought and trying to stop it is what I mean by fighting it. And in that 2-year time period, and I want to say this too, I had been having this kind of thought process in my mind for many, many years. It was, by anybody's standards, it's a normal way to think ultimately, but it wasn't the perfect peace, that I knew was possible. And so I wanted to get it out of me. And so anyway, in that 2-year journey, I'm intensely in the scriptures. So this isn't like some rebellious period I'm having. I'm like chasing God and wanting to understand him. And I, at that time, was trying everything I'd ever been taught, everything I could think of, any pastor teaching about how to live free or have peace, any Bible teacher, any devotional I'd read, any book I'd read. I was trying it all. And it's actually, from this side of things, kind of comical, all the things I tried to just be free.
It always is. It always is. Doesn't make it wrong, but it's a journey for sure.
So I kind of came to the conclusion after time, like, nothing is working that I've been taught. What's missing? And the one thing I really still trusted at this point was not what humans were giving me, but I trusted the scriptures. Like I just had this instinct, God's got an answer for me in here, because there's a testimony there's testimony all throughout these pages of this life that I can live. So somehow the answer is in the scriptures. I don't know of anybody at that point in my life. I didn't know of anybody who gave me an answer that worked. And so I decided I needed to go searching for the answer myself in scriptures. And you have to understand, I'm in seminary at the time, so I'm also equipped to begin to do that at a level that is atypical. I guess I've already been through hermeneutics classes. I'm taking Greek, I'm doing all of this stuff. So I'm very equipped to do it. And so I began this ravenous journey through the scriptures to try to just find the how. How do I live in the freedom, for which, sorry, I'm trying to quote a verse and now it's gone. But how do I live in this freedom that I think I can live in? And so, so that's where it started. In seminary, I had an assignment. I had an assignment in John 11, which is the story of Lazarus being raised from the dead. And in there's this interesting line that caught me off guard. It was not what my assignment was on. I was to write a paper on something with that narrative in John 11. And so word comes to Jesus that Lazarus is really sick, and he doesn't say they're going to go heal him or anything. 4 days later, he says, okay, now we're going to go see Lazarus. And the disciples kind of rebel and say, no, we can't do that. They were just trying to stone you. And Jesus's next words are what I got hung up on and what I'm still hung up on a decade later. And they are, I'm so used to using digital Bible that I'm using paper here. So
that's okay. I love that.
Just give me one moment here. I had it. Oh, here, I printed it off. Jesus says to his disciples, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. If anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. So it's very intrigued and then, then they end up going on to Lazarus, but it was kind of like, what does that have to do with anything? But I kind of had this hunch, like, I think this might hold my answer to the how, something about this idea of walking in the light. And so I ended up going way above and beyond for this assignment. I wrote a multi-page paper, and I remember highlighting a section and saying, this is my assignment, but because I did all this extra work about light, I'm going to include that.
Not a teacher's pet or overachiever at all.
Oh my gosh.
I love it so much though, because when something sparks you, and I think this goes to play in every realm of life, whether you're studying the Bible or you're really intrigued into technology and you decide to build Facebook, right? I'm going to use a non-Christian perspective right here, is the knowing that God gives that to you. And whether you believe that it's from God or not, but when you become so ingrained in something, he has purpose in that. And so it's just, are you allowing it to be something that you hold in the light, or are you keeping it something that's in the dark? So I love that example. And I will circle back to the story of Lazarus. Not right now, because we can come back to it because this is so good. So keep going. So you have this thing, you have this massive revelation, at least interest, not maybe fully revelation at this point. Okay.
Yes. So a year after I write this paper, I sense this knowing, I guess, that I need to transfer schools. This was a seminary startup, and it had limited courses at a time, and I wanted to expedite my degree and get my credentials in and move on with my life, essentially. Just move forward. I shouldn't say move on.
We got babies at home and all the things. Yeah.
Right. Come on, let's go here. So I started looking into transferring schools. In that window, I had some friends who I was meeting with to pray with weekly, and we would get into lots of theological discussions, lots of discussions about the Bible. And I was in seminary at the time, so I had a lot to say in those discussions, I guess. But one of them finally said, you know what, you're a teacher, you should teach us. Instead of meeting for prayer explicitly, why don't we meet and you just teach us? And anyway, long story short there again, I said yes, because I'm like, yes, I know I'm supposed to be a teacher. I know I'm supposed to be a Bible teacher. I didn't see this coming, but this seems right. And this seems like the right group to start it with. So I am in the process of transferring colleges, which end up falling through. I had also at the same time quit my seminary I was at. I felt God calling me forward, to another seminary. And I thought I was going to be starting that semester in this new seminary. Well, the classes I needed to take as I was talking to admissions and had an advisor, the classes I wanted to get into immediately that semester weren't available for a whole year. So I had the decision to make. Do I move forward with other classes right now or just wait and get into these? They were language courses specifically. I chose to wait. So all of a sudden, I've quit seminary. That's dropped off my plate. And I only have really one and a half categories of my 3 categories filled at the time because my baby is getting older. So I'm staying at home with my kids. I'm no longer illustrating, but now I have this class to teach. What I thought was going to be this little devotional class. And I told them, yes, I'll do it, but I'm way too busy with seminary. And all of a sudden that's gone. All of a sudden my time's way opened up. And I asked them, I say, I've been really interested in this concept that I studied a year ago about light. And it has to do with some personal stuff. I'm just really intrigued by it. Do you care? I was originally going to teach on a different subject, but because of how things worked out, I just said, is it okay if I teach on what it means to walk in the light? I really want to look into that more. They were good with it. So that was the first time I taught through what is now my course, When God Created Light. It is actually, going to be 3 courses. I taught an entire school year. And now remember, I think that in a year I'm going to be starting seminary. But by the time I got through teaching for an entire school year, and by the time we got through all this content and all this revelation that we learned, we were sitting at the end of the class, literally speechless, just shaking our heads going, what in the world was that? What did God just do? And as the teacher and as the researcher, I'm going, this isn't just for us. This isn't just for, 4 people. This is like everybody needs this. This has to be multiplied and get to more people. And so at that point, I knew there was no question in my mind. I'm not going back to seminary. I'm going to immerse myself in this work and in this research. And at that point, I was thinking I'm going to write it into a book. And I think it was shortly after that, we were at She Speaks. And so it ended up being about 3 more. So, as things go, as a researcher, I'm like, okay, 2 months later, I'm like, okay, I'm going to now write all this stuff out that I learned. It's going to be easy. I'm just going to, I've done all the research. I'm just going to write out what I know. And as I'm going to go back to the beginning of my class and that research, of course, new layers have already developed in my research. And I think I'm going to start typing and writing it up. I'm starting to see, I'm just having questions like, well, it seems like there's a deeper answer to that, or I think I need to learn more. And so I ended up doing about 3 more years of research until it finally became the class it is now. And so with all of that, that leads up to what your original question was as far as some of my process and how I teach and the depth there. And so when the first lesson, really the first half of lesson 1, we really go through hermeneutics. And I've already kind of touched on that a little bit. And that is very much a cornerstone to the work I do. It's the biggest game changers in the work I do and in the revelation I've been able to ascertain and receive as well. So can I talk on hermeneutics?
Oh my gosh, please.
Slightly?
Yeah, this is amazing. I already am thinking about all the people that I'm about to send this to after we're done going live. So it's amazing. I'm learning.
Okay, great. So hermeneutics, first of all, and obviously if you take the course, you're going to get a deeper dive into this, but hermeneutic comes from the Greek word to interpret. Okay, and I'm going to read just a couple things here for you. It is the discipline of hermeneutics refers to a method or theory of interpretation, When you are a researcher, like I am, you must have a consistent, systematic method for withdrawing truth from the subject or object you are researching. Without consistent method, there's no plumb line for withdrawing truth about whatever we're studying. For instance, we see this in other areas of research. Actually, in every legit area of research, there is some level, there is hermeneutics for that area. For instance, in natural science, we learned in school about the scientific method, right? There's this 5-step scientific method. And listen to the definition of it. It says, a method of procedure that has characterized natural science since the 17th century, consisting of systematic observation, measurement, and experiment, and the formulation, testing, and modification of hypothesis. So just to review, because this is very applicable to the scriptures as well, the 5 steps were, first, you ask a question about the natural subject. Maybe it's a frog, maybe it's a rock in natural science that you are wanting to understand better. First, you ask a question of it. Step 2 is you do your background research. You look into the subject. Step 3 is you construct a hypothesis. Step 4 is you test your hypothesis by doing an experiment to see if it holds up. And step 5 is you analyze the data and draw a conclusion. So these steps mirror precisely what I do on the daily, hour after hour, with a few additions, such as the Holy Spirit is an integral part of research and coming to understand and guidance through the scriptures. Absolutely integral. Integral. You know, okay, thank you. Okay. Another principle of interpretation that I've learned as I've gone, I was not taught it. I don't even know that you could read about it in a book. It's just through experience. I've kind of learned this is the rule of location. And I liken this to if we got a letter from somebody in England, they speak the same language as us, but they have different meanings for different words. And so if they're writing a letter and in the letter they reference chips, they reference football, they reference a number of things. Well, I want to make sure if I want to understand my friend from England well, I want to remember that in England, chips are not potato chips, they're French fries. In England, football isn't, NFL football, American football, it's soccer, and so on. So I've learned through my process of discovery that we also need to remember that God is in heaven. And the scriptures were penned by men, right? But we know that they were breathed out by God. He is the ultimate author of the scriptures. And so having an understanding of Middle Eastern thinking, having an understanding of Jewish, Hebrew thinking, and 2,000 years ago, thinking is very important. Absolutely. But ultimately, what I've discovered is that we need to understand that the author wasn't Middle Eastern. The author was of heaven. The author is God. And so we need to learn how to sort of understand what God means from his perspective in different words. So one of the ways that actually what was kind of my gateway, I guess you could say, into starting to understand how important this was when I was studying the word glory. And do lots and lots of word studies. So it's important to remember that our translations are not the inspired scriptures. The original Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic are the inspired scriptures. So as often as we can, as much as possible, we need to reference those. And so I'm constantly doing original language studies. And so I was studying glory at the time and wanting to understand what that meant. I had kind of a concept in my mind already of what glory meant, from church, from Bible study, and so on. But as a researcher, nothing is left, like no stone is left unturned. You go back and you relook at everything. You have to, if you want to have that consistent hermeneutic and be consistent in everything you do. So with glory, what I found was that in the Hebrew, I'll tell you the Greek first. The Greek word for glory means opinion. Okay, that's interesting thought or opinion. And in the Hebrew, it very literally means, and this is the one we're most familiar with, it means weight, and specifically, this is kind of where things began to shift for me. As I dug into what does that weight mean, I began to see that most of the time when this word was used, it was referring to currency. Like, think of pounds in Europe, right? And how money has, through history, been counted by weight. And I began to see that the origins of this Hebrew word were related to currency. So this is where I make a hypothesis, and my hypothesis was, what if, because I do not believe that you can just pick. I can't pick the Hebrew over the Greek because I don't understand what opinion has to do with glory. I am more of the mindset that, well, they must harmonize somehow. And it is our responsibility to figure out how. So I hypothesized, what if there is a currency in heaven that is made of the opinions of God? Okay. So what then you do as the researcher is you take that idea, like there's some sort of spiritual currency that has to do with God's thoughts. Okay. So what you do is you take that idea, that hypothesis, it's not set in stone, it's still hypothesis, and you go to every single use of glory from Genesis to Revelation, and you plug it in to see if it works. If it doesn't work, you throw it out. But what happens more often than not is that it does work. What happens, though, is our understanding of what glory is changes, our understanding of certain passages change. But that's where I began to realize, like, from heaven's perspective, when God is talking about glory, there's like some heavenly economy that is happening around us. And it makes sense when you think of things like being an heir of heaven, being an heir of God, having an inheritance. Like, all of a sudden that begins to just shift when you think about what glory means. And so I started to learn that there's this rule of location that's extremely important. And so when we come to the scriptures, a lot of us have heard of the word exegesis, but fewer of us have heard of the word eisegesis. And they both have the same word Jesus in them, but they have a different prefix. Exegesis has to do with drawing out the meaning, and eisegesis has to do with putting meaning into something. So when we are studying the scriptures, for instance, what we want to do, if we really want to understand what God himself is saying, is we want to do as little eisegesis as possible. We want to take away any pre-understandings we have, any theology we may already have. We want to hold that in open hands to God, always to edit as he sees fit. We want to take away any cultural understandings we have. We want to take away anything we've been taught. We don't want to read anything into the text. We want the purest way to extract from the text is to let all that go. Know that if that's true, if any of it's true, it's going to hold up under the test of scripture. And then we seek to just simply withdraw meaning. And so that's where this rule of location is. Like, if we're looking at this letter from our friend from England, like, the best way to extract the correct meaning of the letter is to go, okay, what does this mean where they're at? So that's a huge part of my methodology, and you can see a glimpse into what I'm doing, and you can imagine how it's kind of snowballed into quite the thing.
Yeah, I mean,
and this course is quite deep.
Mm-hmm. I imagine you every single night, like falling asleep with a Bible just open on your chest, because there's no way that you can like release it. And even when you go to church or you're having conversation with someone, or you hear a new worship song that comes out, or your kids have a question, it's like, scientific method. Hermeneutics is about to come out. Are you ready for this question? Because I've got an answer. It's just going to take me a year or so to get back to you. And It's like, it's incredible. And we talked about when you become so hyper-focused on something, the gift that it is, and also what can feel like a huge burden. Absolutely. And so I'm curious, like, how are you sharing this right now beyond the course? Who are you teaching? who is sitting at your feet? Because I feel like you're a sensei and I just need to sit there and just like receive like your first classmates, right? I want to know, like, how is this getting out into the world, and like, what's your vision for it, and what's in the making?
So the primary way it is getting out into the world right now is the course. It has really been picking up speed as far as people taking it, talking about it. I'm getting incredible feedback. I've had some people with some notoriety now endorse it and want it to spread. So that's the main way. What I'm looking at now, though, is putting it into print, because I think for a lot of people, an online course just isn't on their radar or isn't a thing they would do. But a lot of people would still pick up a book. And so nothing has officially begun yet, but that is a next step. It's really about multiplication right now. So right now it's about taking this content and giving it to as many demographics as I can. So I'm not only looking at making kind of a book replication of this course for adults, I'm now beginning to look at getting it in front of children or making it accessible to children and really simplifying it, bringing my art back, my illustration back in to do that. And I'm creating it for children, but I see bringing this to youth. I see bringing it to the seminary level. I'd love to create a systematic theology volume of books. There's just so many. That's like step number one that I see. Then it'll be making the next course and doing more speaking and stuff. But it's really that.
It's so incredible. And I could totally see the youth piece coming into play, because I know how good of an artist you are. You guys have to follow her on social media. You'll get a taste of a bit of that. And her website link is dropped here. Instagram is dropped here. I feel like I have 1,000 more questions I could ask in my own selfish eagerness for word dissection. But I love the vision of it. And I remember when we first met, it was all about, I'm going to make these textbooks and I'm going to teach in this realm. And so to hear that that's still a part of it, and to know that you've expanded your understanding before you even come to those. I think one of the things that, as you were talking, I wanted to take note of is, one, the process of writing and the time of writing, and God's constraint and pace is so much different than ours. And so we had this eagerness when we went to that conference, like, this is revelation. It needs to get out right now. Now there's publishing and agent restraints that they create on their own timeline. You can't get this book out for 18 months to 3 years, depending on when the publisher picks you up. And you're like, are you serious? The message is now, the timeliness is now.
Right.
But I feel like every time that a book comes to surface, whether they wrote it in a month or they wrote it in 3 years, like the book I've been writing, or 10 years, like you've been researching and creating, that God's timing is like exactly on time for it. And so that's where that like trust piece comes so much into play when we think about pace and constraints that the world gives us versus the knowing and the plan, which circles right back to the very beginning of light that he has had since before we were even born and put here. I think the revelations paralleled to the eagerness of people wanting that depth that we were talking about in society as a whole, in the church as a whole, in people and humanity as a whole. It's literally just going to be so beautifully enmeshed. So I'm excited for you. I want to be able to get it in the hands of as many as possible. I immediately was like, how can we get this into universities? I know that is definitely a possibility. I'm actually connected to some other authors who have their books, and their books are not in the same premise as yours, definitely not Hermeneutics, and they've gotten it into different places. Also giving an opportunity for people to get certified in something after they've gone through your course could be something really unique as well for a pastor or for a ministry leader or anybody. So some extra little nuggets to think about.
I love that.
Always thinking of
you want to pick my brain on theology and I want to pick yours on business.
Exactly. Hey, God has a placement and a purpose for every friendship and every relationship under heaven. So
absolutely.
I am here for you in that regard. I want to circle into your outside of this, because I know that you are more than even just a researcher. And, you are a mom and you are a wife. And I know you're an athlete and always working out, and you put your mental health in a priority. And so speaking into maybe a specific realm that's touching you right now, or since you've been walking in the light, what wisdom could you give the people who are listening?
Yes. So my why into all that I do has always been the how, right? And I've said that. And so what my priority is before anything else when it comes to just life, daily life, is what I call identity fitness. And I believe that it affects literally every area of our lives, and the fitness or the balance or the health of literally every area of our lives. And when I talk about identity fitness, what I mean is the practice of the truth, the practice of who we really are. And that's ultimately what I have discovered that, for me at least, was missing in my understanding. I was not aware of what and who I am, like the essence of what I am, which I have found and believe is light. It's that light that was actually created on day one that sometimes throws people off because of day 6, God made humans in the image of God. But I won't get there. You got to take my class. Ultimately, what does
she's not plugging. She just doesn't have time. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Okay. So ultimately, identity fitness is about walking in who I really am, walking not with the concept that I am something on the outside of me, whether it's my body, whether it's somebody's opinion of me, whether it's my career, whether it's the relationships I have, and so on. My identity is within me. And my identity is connected to God, but it takes a practice, because being part of this world, we're constantly taught that who we are is outside of us. And so that practicing the truth is practicing every single day, returning within, returning to the idea that actually I'm not a physical body. I'm connected to one, but that's not what I am. Actually, I'm not the successes I have. Actually, I'm not the relationships I'm in. Actually, I'm not what people think of me. And that's a huge one for all of us. It's definitely been a huge one for me. I'm not the way I do this or that, right? And returning into the wholeness that I already am, believing it and walking it out in my life. And so that's my number one priority, is that identity fitness, practicing it, and constantly pursuing the growth that brings.
That is
and the freedom.
Such powerful phraseology, and so paralleled with fit and faith, because yes. I really believe that. And I feel like faith is the full entity of who we are. It's actually the premise of how I teach business. I always say that it's in this entrepreneurial thumbprint that we exist. And what that thumbprint is first rooted in your identity. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know who or whose you are, the brand and the business that you create on the external is actually fallen, is actually broken, is actually a mess. I did it for years. So I get it. And it's part of my testimony. But identity. It's such a massive concept, but parallel to light, parallel to love, and parallel to our Father who is our creator. When you get to that, it goes back to one of our guests who's watching live she said, this has been so intriguing for someone like me who is simple-minded. And so it's to know that your simple-mindedness is only because of lack of access. And so having access to this deep piece of God's heart, which is what's been implanted in Katie, is something we all have the ability to understand. It's just the willingness, the fitness, the identity fitness that we put into practice. And so it's incredible to watch you become stronger in that, no pun intended, but also intended. And also to be able to equip other people to do the same, because I think that that's the unlock to other people fully being able to access and walk in the light. I want to do it. I want to do it better. Right? So incredibly powerful, Katie. I'm so grateful and honored to know you. I will have your researched, indexed books in my shelf one day, and I've got to get my certified Walk in the Light course under my belt as well.
Right. Yes.
So you guys definitely touch base with Katie. Are you on Instagram most?
I am primarily on Instagram. Okay. Yes. So if you're going to follow me there.
And inblackandlight.com. Inblackandlight.com is Katie Moon.
Katie Moon. If you just remember my name, Katie Moon.
Oh, easy.
Yes.
It all goes to the same place.
Yep. On Instagram, I'm Katie A.
Moon. Okay.
Katie A. Moon. Actually.
Easy peasy, you guys.
Yep.
Get in touch with her today. All the links are already attached. And again, I'm so grateful. I can't wait to share a treehouse with you again in the future.
This was so fun. Yes, let's do it.
Love you so much. You're welcome.
Bye.